morning, everyone. Bom dia. I'm going to speak in English, and so on a translator, go ahead. And welcome to those still joining us. As you'll see, we want to create a session that is a bit more interactive and allows for conversation and facilitation between different people, as we're all really experts in this. And so, in that spirit, we're going to be quite short with our remarks. Each of us speak only about 5 minutes about this common theme, and then we will take time in order to have discussion with you all in the manner that we really can learn from. So, to begin, thank you so much for joining this session. My name is Carrick. I am from the World Resources Institute's Faith and Sustainability Initiative, and it's really a pleasure to be here and to share with you a conversation on faith and environmental defense. Within that realm, the focus really on this topic comes from research that we did in Brazil, Mexico, and Colombia over the past several years in collaboration with the Laudato Si Research Institute at the University of Oxford and other partners that looked into the role that faith actors, indigenous peoples, traditional communities play in socio-environmental disputes, and found that those communities play an extremely important role, yet often lack the formal recognition and supports necessary in order to take that role and amplify it in protection of local life and territory. And so this session is really building off of some of the experiences from that research, as well as from the distinguished panelists that sit around me. I'll open just quickly with a quote from a female faith leader in Altamira, Brazil, where one of our case studies took place. If we lose nature, we lose ourselves too. There's a deep spiritual and existential connection that faith communities have with the natural world, and this inspires and motivates environmental defense, not just here in Brazil or in Mexico and Colombia, but worldwide, particularly in areas that are threatened by existential threats of extraction and exploitation, which not only threaten human rights, but also degrade the environment. There's a very dangerous landscape for environmental defenders as well, noting, for example, that Latin America is the deadliest region for these activists, with over 1,000 losing their lives since 2012. Famous names, for example, Berta Cáceres and others that many know, who are motivated truly by their faith and an understanding of their relationship to their environment, who sacrificed their lives and were murdered for the work they were doing to defend lives and territory. The research from WRI and LSRI also looked, for example, in Caquetá, Colombia, where the Catholic Church's Vicaría del Sur has been instrumental in resisting oil exploitation in that region. Through their work of the Comisiones de la Vida de Agua, which translate to Commissions for the Life of Water, recognizing the life of water, they blend spirituality with human rights, advocacy, and environmental defense to foster nonviolent collective action against that oil exploitation, which up until now and still today has been successful. Another really critical piece of that research showed the crucial role that women play in faith communities in organizing for environmental defense. It is not always the religious leader, the pastor, the bishop, the imam who is leading in the charge for environmental defense. It is often other faith actors, and many times women, who are at the forefront and therefore require special support, security, but also formal recognition of that role and all of the support that would come along outside it. And so today we've invited a really fantastic and impressive panel of people to speak with you and share some brief insights on this theme of faith and defense of life and territory, faith and environmental defense. I'm honored to be co-moderating with Pastor Romy from the Brazilian Institute of Churches, and I will first pass the floor to Pastor Romy, and then we will continue with our other panelists. Pastor Romy, a palavra é contigo. Obrigado.
bom dia a todas as pessoas. Muito bom a gente estar aqui nesse momento, nessa plenária, para poder aprofundar as temáticas que a gente tem visto ao longo desses dias. Eu sou pastora Rome, da Igreja Evangélica de Confissão Luterana no Brasil, mas trabalho na Secretaria-Geral do Conselho Nacional de Igrejas Cristãs. Sobre o tema, as ações que a gente tem feito para conter ou para denunciar e também para proteger povos atingidos pelas mudanças climáticas, eu gostaria de compartilhar 2 casos. Primeiro, são o que nós temos chamado de missões ecumênicas, que são conduzidas pelo Fórum Ecumênico ACT Brasil. Nós realizamos 3 missões ecumênicas, na verdade realizamos mais, mas eu vou me reportar especificamente às 3 missões ecumênicas que foram realizadas no Mato Grosso do Sul, junto aos povos guaranis e caiovás. No Brasil, os povos guaranis e caiovás, eles são um dos povos mais atacados pelo agronegócio, principalmente pelo cultivo da soja, no Mato Grosso do Sul. E os ataques a esses povos, os grandes fazendeiros, eles têm uma prática de contratação de pessoas cuja função é degradar a dignidade, atacar a dignidade dessas comunidades indígenas. E a segunda prática é a de queimar, destruir, como a doutora Kenari, que falou hoje de manhã no painel, as casas de reza. As casas de reza, para os guaranis caiovás, são os lugares de encontro, é o lugar da espiritualidade e da oralidade, em que os mais velhos passam para os mais jovens toda a cultura, toda a tradição, toda a prática, enfim, espiritual que eles vivem. Então, quando se queima uma casa de reza, se queima a visão de mundo, a cosmovisão desses povos. Da mesma forma, as Iandecis, que são as mulheres que têm o papel de exercício de liderança religiosa na comunidade, elas têm sido perseguidas, elas são vítimas de abuso sexual e, recentemente, nós tivemos o caso de uma Iandeci e também o companheiro dela terem sido queimados vivos. Eles foram mortos e eles foram queimados. E nós fizemos, então, uma missão ecumênica em que nós organizamos, levamos às igrejas para conhecer a história e também para chamar a atenção das autoridades públicas para a necessidade da proteção dessa cultura. Porque se a gente perde uma cultura indígena, se a gente perde uma expressão religiosa, a gente também perde uma expressão do sagrado. E o segundo caso, sobre o qual eu gostaria de falar muito rapidamente, é o caso vivido por uma das igrejas membro do nosso Conselho Nacional de Igrejas, que é uma das igrejas vinculada à Aliança de Batistas do Brasil. Em Alagoas tem a Igreja Batista do Pinheiro. E a Igreja Batista do Pinheiro, ela fica localizada num bairro na cidade de Maceió, que é a capital do Alagoas, que foi todo ele afundado por causa de ações da Braskem, uma mineradora. E a Igreja Batista do Pinheiro, junto com o pastor Wellington e a pastora Ódia, é uma comunidade de fé que tem feito toda a resistência contra a ação da Braskem. Porque a Braskem obrigou todas as pessoas que vivem nesse bairro, que é um bairro central da cidade de Alagoas, a se retirarem, com indenizações baixíssimas, e a Igreja Batista do Pinheiro, então, fez a opção de não se retirar do bairro, permanecer no bairro. Agora eles tiveram que, por sobrevivência, alugar um outro espaço, mas eles continuam liderando as resistências, as denúncias e reivindicando por parte do governo do estado da Alagoas uma indenização uma reparação justa a todas as pessoas que perderam suas casas. E para finalizar, tanto é que tanto o pastor Aódia quanto o pastor Wellington, eles são pessoas ameaçadas por causa dessa resistência que eles têm feito contra essa mineradora chamada Braskem. Muito obrigada.
Obrigado, Pastor Jajome, pela sua intervenção. I think so much of what you raise is of such critical importance, and this protection of culture, cosmovision, of spirituality really echoes even another insight from this research I referred to. And I'll read to you the words of a faith leader from Belo Monte, a community threatened by the construction of a dam. The connection with life is the source of hope to reconstruct what has been destroyed. Without that connection, if we lose that connection, that strength coming from connection with forests, rivers, and ancestors, there would be no motivation for the struggle. I now want to pass the floor to Carlos Enrique Silveira, the Project and Mobilization Coordinator for the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative here in Brazil. Carlos, the floor is with you.
Bom dia a todos e a todas. Meu nome é Carlos Henrique, eu sou coordenador de projetos da Iniciativa Interreligiosa. E nós, da Iniciativa Interreligiosa, nós temos um entendimento muito claro de que o nosso tempo ele é curto de atuação. Então nós temos um começo, um meio e um fim. É uma iniciativa que existe para poder potencializar a atividade de comunidades religiosas no enfrentamento das questões climáticas e no direito dos povos indígenas e comunidades tradicionais. Nesse sentido, o que a gente percebeu ao longo da nossa atuação é que as comunidades religiosas no Brasil, em sua maioria, estão muito distantes da temática ambiental, da temática do direito dos povos indígenas. É algo muito distante para eles. Mas, além disso, os líderes religiosos eles estão muito envolvidos na assistência a algumas temáticas que são transversais, que estão diretamente ligadas à pauta ambiental, como, por exemplo, os desastres climáticos. Então a gente começou a perceber que talvez fosse um caminho de atuação a gente desenvolver projetos que conectassem a pauta ambiental e os desastres climáticos de uma forma mais profunda e mais complexa, adicionando aí camadas de complexidade no entendimento e construindo o ensino para esses líderes a partir dessa realidade. Então, no momento que as lideranças religiosas estão cada vez mais dentro de uma bolha, cada vez mais nichadas, cada vez mais polarizadas, a gente encontrar um caminho que respeite os posicionamentos, sem negar a realidade climática, sem negar a necessidade de emergência, era algo urgente. A gente construiu uma visita ao Instituto Nacional de Pesquisas Espaciais, ao Centro Nacional de Monitoramento de Alertas e Desastres Naturais. Durante essa visita, essas lideranças elas passam 2 dias, um dia em cada um desses centros de pesquisa, e nesses 2 dias elas têm uma imersão na temática de desastres climáticos, direito dos povos indígenas e na questão climática. Então, no primeiro momento, essas lideranças vão ver a origem dos desastres, como acontecem os desastres, o que causa os desastres, lá no CEMADEM. A partir dessa perspectiva do que é um desastre, do que tem acontecido, eles começam a ser introduzidos nessa temática de que os desastres climáticos, na verdade, estão relacionados com a crise global que a gente vive, com a crise climática global que a gente vive. E no segundo dia eles vão então para o Instituto Nacional de Pesquisas Espaciais, onde eles veem como os desastres climáticos estão diretamente ligados com o desmatamento da floresta amazônica. E aí eles conseguem ter essa visão então completa de que o desastre climático que eles atuam, onde pessoas morrem, muitas pessoas de suas comunidades de fé são atingidas, isso não é algo isolado. Isso tem uma conexão direta com o que tem acontecido dentro da floresta, com o que tem acontecido com os povos indígenas. Então, toda essa construção permitiu que a gente criasse uma rede com mais de 350 líderes brasileiros, de todos os espectros político-partidários, e com todas as visões, uma rede que respeita essas visões, mas que ao mesmo tempo se posiciona e posiciona esses líderes numa cena de que eles não podem negar o que está acontecendo, e a partir do momento que você conhece a verdade sobre algum fato, de fato você precisa atuar, de fato você precisa enfrentar essa realidade ou então você vai estar sendo um mentiroso. Como nós sabemos, um líder religioso, um dos valores que ele mais preza é o valor da verdade. A gente encontrou nessa construção, nessa formação, um espaço para poder fazer isso. Nossa intenção com isso é mudar um cenário de aproximadamente 85% dessas lideranças que são indiferentes a esses temas. Nós temos aí 5% que são pessoas negacionistas, que são pessoas que militam contra o aquecimento global, que contam mentiras, que espalham fake news, chegando ao limite de falar que os desastres climáticos são criados, lideranças religiosas que falam que os desastres climáticos são criados, e nós temos 85% das pessoas que são indiferentes e 10% das pessoas que são engajadas, que são defensoras da pauta climática. O nosso grande objetivo é aumentar o número de pessoas que são defensoras para 90%, 90% de pessoas que vão defender as questões climáticas, reduzindo assim esse número de indiferentes e esse número de negacionistas. E nos próximos 5 anos que nós temos, nós estamos profundamente comprometidos com essa realidade. Queremos contar, inclusive, com o apoio de todos aqueles que quiserem nos ajudar, inclusive vocês que estão aqui hoje.
Muito obrigado, Carlos. I really appreciate, I think, the connection or the importance that Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is placing on this training, on this formation, on this capacity building, which I think is so central. A panel the other day was talking about at times we have the laws in place, and yet the enforcement or implementation is not always there. And I know for so much of the work in environmental defense, it's not just a matter of the enabling environment, but also really equipping defenders in local communities with that capacity and training, knowledge, financial, human support in order to be able to advocate on behalf of those rights. And so IRI is really doing that critical work. Finally, we're very lucky to have on this table Binalakshmi Nepram, the Senior Advisor on Indigenous Issues, Religion and Inclusive Societies at the United States Institute of Peace, a global expert working on issues that we're discussing here today. Bina, I pass you the floor.
Thank you, Carrick, and esteemed fellow panelists. First of all, I pay my respects to the indigenous people of this land on whose ground we stand today. I also pay my respects to our elders, past and present, and for the future is yet to come. It's for them. It's really important. Thank you, World Resources Institute, all the organizers for this, inviting me. Started with a question, who else, indigenous people, know how to protect land, life, territory? So that's one aspect. I know we just have 5 minutes and we will be into breakout sessions to have more engaged conversations. So I will just share 2 minutes each of number one, how indigenous faith are deeply connected to protecting land, life, and territory. Number two, I come from one indigenous territory, from Manipur in the Indo-Burma border. So we also know how our lands have been ravaged by wars, conflicts, exploitation, and transnational organized criminal networks. We know this because the conflict is happening right now, so I'll touch a little bit on that. And finally, to give some hope, what are we doing about it? Because some of us in this room are the change makers, the ones, so provide little thoughts on this. We know that for some of us, indigenous communities, 476 million, living in 90 countries and territories. But in many countries, we are not even recognized as indigenous. In Bangladesh, they are using the word, hopefully after the change, they will allow, but let's try. They use the word ethnic minorities now, just like in China. And indigenous people have been ostracized. Last year, out of the 300 human rights defenders who were killed, 1/3 were indigenous people. In Latin America, where we are, Colombia, as Mrs. the highest number of killings in Colombia, 142, Mexico, 20, 30, 19 in Honduras, 6 in Guatemala. And I have worked closely actually with Bertha Cáceres' daughter. Her mother was killed. And so we are acutely aware of not just what's happening in indigenous resources, land, and territories, but how we have actually paid with our lives. And some of us in this room have managed to survive, including myself. We continue to do the work that we do. But again, what is interesting is the fact that 80% of the world's conflicts happening in biodiversity hotspots for indigenous people. There's a very deep connection between conflicts in today's world, biodiversity, environmental issues, and indigeneity. That's why at the United States Institute of Peace, I'm leading work for the first time in their 40 years history to actually drive home this point in Washington, D.C. Why the world governments, why civil society, faith leaders need to work on this very critical issue there. There are thousands of indigenous cultures and faith around the world. In fact, if you club all the indigenous religion, it would make up the sixth largest religion in the world. So there are 5,000 different cultures and 5,000 different faiths that indigenous cultures in 7 socio-cultural regions of the world. And they are very much connected with nature. Indigenous people consider nature as sacred. In Manipur, we have 5-day festival, which is honoring the forest. Just honoring the forest. You will not cut a tree before you pray in front of it. And once you cut it, you have to plant another one. You don't cut and run away with it, like the lumber merchants. So very much connected with nature. In fact, very much part of it. I don't know if you're aware that in New Zealand in 2017, New Zealand granted legal personhood to the Wanganui River. This is this beautiful river, and Canada followed suit. This is the river which now has legal status as us. So again, because the Maori people fought for over hundreds of years, because they say that without the river, we do not exist. So again, just to see how indigenous people and the connection and defending that land. In fact, in the Maori culture, they say, I am the river and the river is me. So that's one thing, and just to bring home the point of the really is essential. In Manipur, the indigenous people of Manipur have a text. The text is called the Dialectics of the Forest. It's a written text we have in indigenous cultures. So not all indigenous cultures are oral. We have written, in which there's an entire treatise on how to live with nature. So there is a lot of knowledge out there to be able to take us through, protect people, peace, and planet. I now go to the other side, the darker side of indigenous lands. As I mentioned, currently, whether it's Sudan, whether it's Somalia, whether it's Indo-Burma border, there is a lot of conflicts there. And indigenous territories are huge resources. There's oil, natural gas under Manipur, for instance. There are companies, and indigenous people are not against development. But what they have done in our region is they take out 99% and leave us impoverished. So these are some of the challenges. Sacred sites have been desecrated. So many, northeast of India is now becoming a part of the Golden Pentagon drug production sites. Many indigenous territories are now used for drug trafficking sites. So that's one. And then a lot of war going on where armed groups, armed with heavy sophisticated weapons, are now controlling our territories, working very closely with different other sectors from outside the world. And finally, because my time is up, now the other point. So this year at the United States Institute of Peace, we convened 120 indigenous leaders from 30 countries for the first global summit on indigenous peace building, in which environmental protection became a very important, besides indigenous faith and spiritualism. So we have started work for this, and we have given our recommendations to the UN Department of Peace Building, that they understand what is happening, because in many conflicts around the world, people don't really know what's on the ground reality, and particularly where indigenous voices, So, and finally, we have, at the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, we have been able to make our voice heard, and the outcome document contained many issues of protecting land, rights, and our spirituality, and also in truth and reconciliation and conflict resolution mechanisms. Indigenous forms of conflict resolution mechanisms have been absent normative. And finally, all of you are welcomed if you are coming to the UN General Assembly for a briefing on 18th of September. We will brief nation states on why they should take action on it. So working with faith leaders, working with indigenous communities and their faith, and also with people who care about people, peace, and planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vinalakshmi, and a really moving and sort of haunting reminder that there's those in the room that their presence here is not guaranteed, and we're very grateful for so much of the work that you do and your presence. I also think the mention of rights of nature is extremely relevant, and one that I hope continue to gain more attention and more consideration at forums like this, at the G20, at UNGA, and beyond, because I think it is, with the tools we have today, one of the better ways to respect cosmovisions of indigenous peoples and integrate those into policy mechanisms that can actually work to protect life and territory. I now, what our goal is, because there's been 3 days of a lot of listening to people talk to you, and you all know this work as well, if not better than us, really want to encourage opportunities to get to know one another. So the first thing that I'd like you to do is look to a person next to you and introduce yourself and your name and thank them for being here. Great. Thank you for that. And now we have about 50 minutes left in our session. We have prepared some questions for your reflection, which we can share, but I'm sure you all have others. And we're going to ask you to get into small groups and discuss these questions, share your experiences. And in each group, I would like you to nominate someone as a note taker, who then, in the final 20 minutes or so of this session, will come back. We'll have that note taker come and share what you all discussed and facilitate some discussion around it. And so it might make sense for there to be some Portuguese speaking groups and English speaking groups. I'll trust you all to figure that out. And I'll read to you some of the questions that we've considered. But again, I welcome any discussion that you see fit. Those questions are not on my screen. Excuse me. Great. The first question, how can religious communities and the knowledge systems of indigenous and traditional peoples collaborate more effectively? What are the main challenges and opportunities in integrating religious and indigenous peoples' approaches to socio-environmental defense? What practical steps and recommendations for enhancing these collaborations at local, national, and global levels? So please find some small groups, and we'll give about 20 minutes or so to these discussions. And we're going to join you all because we're done being behind here and we want to be among you. Thank you. Oh. possível fazer as questões no ecrã? Sim. Posso compartilhar as perguntas? Desculpa. about. Is this working? No.
My name is Dinesh. Oh, sorry. Uh, my name is Dinesh Suna. I was part of the small group, the English-speaking group. Mostly there was Augusto, and then Navina, and Peter Probe, who had to leave. And on the three questions that we discussed, we very quickly, what we talked about is that the religions have established as a mainstream religion by eliminating the indigenous traditions, cultures, rituals, and the faith. And that most religions till today do not even acknowledge, which is a pity. I think the first step is the acknowledging the blunder and the mistake that was done. And second, by simply acknowledging and saying sorry is not enough, and therefore reparation also has to be done by honoring the indigenous peoples who were sacrificed for establishment of these mainstream religions, and having policies through governments also to strengthen that. Second is some of the good practices we saw also is that for example, translating Bible in Christianity in the indigenous languages by the religions was a good way of preserving the indigenous languages in the modern linguistic formats. Otherwise, that may not have been. So this is something good also in there, and the religion and indigenous cultures coming together. Number three, one other good practice we also saw is, for example, of Ethiopia. The Orthodox churches are having very green, thick forests around each of their churches, and that is the most part of Ethiopia's greenery. It's contributing to, thanks to the churches, the Orthodox Church, and the indigenous peoples mostly live around it. And maybe Bina or Augusto something.
We were also talking about the problems of intolerance that we face in different countries like India and like Brazil. And we were just discussing about this problem of how you can try to create some openness in the hearts of the ones who are totally closed, as we see so many Christian churches in Brazil, so many Hindus in India, and we were talking that we need to connect ourselves through our common values, our universal values, and be so steady in our own spirituality, in our peace, so that we can remain stable against all of this type of opposition. Maybe this could be a way to open the hearts of the ones who are totally closed.
I know we are breaking rules, all of us are speaking from the group, but quickly, just want to share some of the priceless gems that we discussed. One was in terms of the first question, how do we get the indigenous and the religious communities, knowledge systems together? By collaboration, we suggested there could be reflective circles that we can, because a lot of dialogue has not happened between main traditional religion and indigenous religions. So we feel that we should start creating these circles, reflective circles. For example, in Manipur, we gave the example of a current conflict where it's one main religion versus an indigenous religion has been positioned against each other, taking advantage by armed groups and current regimes. So how do we maneuver ourselves out of that way? Have dialogues. Just like. Secondly, Peter also gave a fantastic example. Have you heard about the Sami people, the indigenous people in Europe? Yes. So there, the Church of Norway is in Sami land. So what they did was they also create a Sami church council. So in that way, the main church of Norway coexists with the Sami people's church the way they want to make it. So again, a system of coexistence is possible and doable. And again, Peter shared a lot of good examples. PIL, a lot of religious groups, church groups are also helping indigenous people fight legally because Peter is a lawyer by training. So again, some of the examples I also mentioned about the Quakers, groups who have been a part of the boarding school, but they come to meetings and said, yes, we have been part of the boarding school problem, but now we want to help change and make it right. So I think a lot of truth and reconciliation commissions is that an alarm for a bomb or something? Okay, thank you. Okay.
Great. Thank you very much, first group. The second group, let's take the Portuguese-speaking group here. Vocês tiveram 5 minutos para fazer a sua intervenção. Então, por favor.
Oi. Então, no nosso grupo, nós partimos da constatação de que o conhecimento sobre mudanças climáticas do nosso povo, dos nossos fiéis, é muito superficial. Não se tem uma profundidade. E uma outra coisa também que foi constatada é que o conhecimento, o respeito e a valorização dos saberes e das práticas dos povos originários também é muito frágil, não existe. E o grupo apontava essa necessidade de que, a partir das realidades locais, dos saberes locais, das organizações locais, se possa aprofundar o impacto das mudanças climáticas na vida das pessoas e fazer esse esforço ecumênico, interreligioso, do reconhecimento e do respeito aos saberes dos povos originários, dos povos tradicionais. Que muitas vezes estão próximos nossos geograficamente, mas são invisibilizados. E que é necessário reconhecê-los, né, esses povos, como aqueles que realmente sabem conviver com a natureza, que sabem proteger o ambiente e que têm muito a nos ensinar. E depois também o grupo dizia assim, olha, esse espaço, esse encontro precisa ter uma voz mais forte, no sentido de denunciar, né, a destruição da natureza, a destruição da Amazônia, o sistema econômico que destrói o planeta. A gente está percebendo aqui, foi falado, né, que a gente não tem uma voz mais forte de denúncia. A gente precisava aproveitar esse espaço para fazer essa denúncia, né? Do que o sistema econômico está fazendo com o nosso ambiente. As mineradoras, o agronegócio e toda forma de exploração. Ou seja, se nós não questionamos o modo de produção capitalista, o nosso planeta vai destruir e as nossas iniciativas vão ter pouco impacto, né? E, por fim, a gente entende que precisa, nós enquanto igrejas, movimentos religiosos e tal, superar a dicotomia entre fé e vida. Muitos das nossas igrejas não reconhecem a questão climática, tudo isso que nós estamos debatendo, como algo que diz respeito à fé. Então, a gente precisa fazer esse esforço ecumênico, interreligioso, de superar essas dicotomias, para que as pessoas, as nossas igrejas, né, os nossos povos sejam, de fato, agentes de transformação e cuidadores, de fato, do planeta e da vida.
Thank you very much for the excellent intervention and succinct points. It's excellent. And finally, our third group. Quería saber si hablo en español, si reciben una traducción en inglés, porque es posible que los traductores hablan inglés y español. Did you get a translation in English for that? Perfeito. Então, vamos a fazer uma tradução. The third group, please, go ahead.
Okay, I will try to speak English, and sorry if it's not a good translation because I listen in English, I take notes in Spanish, and I have to translate again. Okay, we start our conversation with a question. How we can to protect our communities, because we was talking about our realities in our own communities, and we talk about collaboration is possible with respect, and if we can recognize uh, all the communities, and if we can really listen each community. We need harmonize. We have in each community traditional values, and we have to harmonize that values. The points of view the most important points of view, and we can transform our challenges if we can harmonize all of our traditional values. We are all in the same territory, so we can si podemos aprovechar todos los puntos que tenemos en común. Yes, yes. Ajá. And if we can learn si podemos aprender los unos de los otros.
If we can.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I think we all see there's a lot of shared reflections among this group. One of the things that the second group had mentioned, that indigenous peoples know how to live with nature and how to coexist. There's research a few years ago now that we did at WRI that showed that lands managed by indigenous peoples were more effective at preserving biodiversity and sequestered more carbon than lands officially designated as protected by government, which I think just goes to really show that indeed this collaboration, deference, and harmonizing among religious communities, indigenous peoples, and other traditional knowledge systems is so essential to our fights around the environment, but also ultimately for people as well, as this is work that is at times violent, resulting in threats and other real challenges, again, for life and for territory. We have 3 minutes left. Does anyone have anything they'd like to share in closing? Remarks, ritual, anything? And yeah, please. Use the microphone just so our colleagues on Zoom can enjoy your remark.
It's just a footnote because I forgot to mention in my presentation, there's some really important work done by indigenous people since 2010 on the concept of environmental violence. It's led by the Indian Treaty Council based in Arizona and North America, but they have done really important work on looking at the types of violence happening in indigenous territories. One, I spoke about drug production, but I would like to also bring home the important points of using pesticides, which are harmful to the human body, which affect maternal health, leading to birth defects has been there. Contamination of our food, water systems has been also identified. Secondly, many indigenous territories, I don't know if you're aware, are testing sites for nuclear weapons and other types of weapons, for example. So these are, for example, Navajo territories. I have met friends in the Navajo territories, and the children have drunk water from the river, which is contaminated from the nuclear testing. So these terms are all called environmental violence, And the indigenous people took it up to the United Nations that it's a recognized term now called environmental violence. And this was spearheaded by the indigenous people. And we call upon all of us, faith leaders, people who care for this planet Earth, that we must try to ensure that we do not hurt, just as we don't want any hurt on our body, we do not want to further hurt the body of Mother Earth. That's one thing. And in Guatemala in January 24 and 25, they're going to have their 5th convention on this. So so if you are in Guatemala around that time, please let us know and I'll connect you to Andrea Carmen, who's organizing it. I will be there personally myself because it's a very important piece of work. So a lot of work has been done on this. I also met the UN Department on Peace Building. They have a term called environmental peace building. Have you heard about this? So they're also doing really important work. So we can connect your work and the work that you all are also doing in a more properly structured manner so that we can get this through together to protect our planet. Thank you.
With that, I thank you all so much. Perhaps this is the one session this week that ends early. You're welcome. A huge thanks to you all, to the panelists, and enjoy your day. See you later. Keep up the good work. Muito obrigado. Até logo. Then I would like to take a photo, a group photo. So if anyone is, those who are comfortable to join a group photo, please let's do it here so that we can see our fantastic title that Jennifer made for us.